All right, we've got Scottt Braun on with us. He's the host of Foul Territory, and it looks like he's in the airport right now if you're watching us on YouTube. Can we get an airport review, Scott?
Newark Airport is nice, quiet, and very freshly renovated. I am in Terminal A, which I think is the new one or the newest renovation. So it looks great. I found a somewhat quiet spot, which is tough to do in an airport, especially when some of the airports like to play music that no one wants to hear. But compared to most, New York area has drastically improved. LaGuardia, which I'm at a lot too, has done a lot of renovations. Not that people are probably tuning in for this, but I do fly all over the place. So maybe in my next life, I'll do airport reviews.
Do you have like a ranking of the 3 New York airports? Because this is kind of like a niche subject.
Mm-hmm.
Like my family's from New York, so is his. So we have some experience in the area. I usually rank LaGuardia down there at the bottom.
Well, LaGuardia has gone through significant changes though and gotten much better. That's the thing is if you're looking at the last 1 to 3 years, because everything strings together for me. I don't know when the renovations occurred. I can't even remember at this point, but it's recent. For me, I'm going to go JFK last on location because unless you are coming from the other side of JFK, I'm coming from usually a New York City type area. It just ends up feeling like it takes so much longer to get from LaGuardia to JFK because it's on the same trek there. But it just feels like you get caught. And I am a flight pusher, like often grabbing the gate right before it closes, the whole deal. So you can imagine the extra like 35 minutes it could take sitting on traffic in that area just destroys me. So I'll go LaGuardia 1, Newark 2, JFK 3, but Newark's quickly catching up based on their renovations here.
Okay, when you're not rushing around at airports and trying to grab that door to make a flight, you host a pretty new baseball show called Foul Territory where you have a bunch of former big leaguers on, and it's a whole panel of guys. It's only been going a few months now, but it's really cool just as two people who have gotten to sit and watch it from afar. What drew you to go and join that chance to make that opportunity a real thing?
Yeah, so we launched publicly in March, and it had been many conversations with current and former players over the years, looking primarily at basketball and football and saying, why not us? Why can't our sport have more of the player influence, new media companies, and podcast, digital, social focus with a very authentic spin to everything? Like no holding back, cursing, just not worrying about another employer. It's independent. Feel like we're seeing that from any top athlete in those other sports. And yet, where are our big voices coming fresh out of the game? And then hearing those conversations from the fresh out of the game former players to the current players. So I think I wanted to be a part of that narrative that brings baseball into more of a new media landscape and also just tells people what's going on like it is without restrictions. Because I think that's important in our game. And I also think it's interesting. Baseball has so much drama and it's worth talking about. And sure, that could be rules, that could be beef with players, that could be dumb shit said by an owner. Like there's just so much to cover. So that's what drew me. It's a great group. It's a lot of different voices, but the similarity with everyone besides me, just being the point guard traffic cop type, is that they are pretty recently out of the game. And I think that brings something unique to everyone. And also they're not held back by working for, a team or a league or anything like that. So it's going to produce significantly different answers. And I was always like that in my prior life, working for MLB. I was always raising my hand to be the one who wanted to call games for Facebook and then YouTube versus just calling them on linear television. Like that was interesting to me. Let me work on those projects. That was an audience and also an interface, right? A user interface that had comments built right into what you were watching, questions, etc. I enjoyed that. It actually took away from the game coverage sometimes, right? Where you're calling a game and I'm keeping an eye on everyone asking questions. But I felt like that's how I would watch a game, and I want to include the people that are watching. They're very smart. Often, some of them are dumb and they're trolls, and you can figure out ways to sift through that. But that's what stood out to me.
Who is the one? Was there one player leading the charge of this, trying to make this happen?
No, I was part of the group that created
No.
it. AJ Przinsky is one of the OGs. So
Okay.
I do the show primarily in Orlando from Monday to Thursday. Friday sometimes we're on the road, are often on the road for our partnership with BetMGM. We'll end up at casinos. We'll end up at ballparks. Last week we were in Cincinnati, and AJ is often leaving on Fridays to call a game for Fox, which obviously we want him to still do that. That is his game calling life, and he's excellent at that. So, yeah, it was myself and some other people behind the scenes on the baseball side that were looking at the industry and saying, I feel like there's a major void here. I mean, I experienced this even in my past job at MLB. People were like, anyone know any good podcasts? And most people were like, nope. For baseball, nope. You know, no offense to you guys, obviously. They're talking about the national side of things, but or they would just have some suggestions and feel like, hey, there's got to be more player content out there. And we would look to the Pat McAfee show, I Am Athlete, the Kelsey brothers, all of these other avenues out there on the player side that was not BS. It was just, hey, here's what's going on in my life for the week, and here's my take on the sport. So that's where it came from.
Is there something you realize now about players after doing this show that you didn't realize before?
I would say they're just like us, but I mean, I've been around players
just a lot
for
richer.
a while. Yeah, a lot richer. Although not all of them,
Yeah,
right?
That's
if
fair.
you're a league minimum guy for a few years, like you're doing well, but it's not like I can retire off, 3 years on a league minimum salary, 6 figures in the bigs. You're 25 years old and you only made it for 3 years. You're still gonna have to do something else. So let's see. Is there anything that I've learned that I didn't realize? I have to think about it. I mean, I think there's a lot of things within the sport that I didn't realize, even though I've been in major league clubhouses for well over a decade regularly, every week, basically on the road, especially the last several years. So, for example, the prominence of being able to take the microphone on the bus. And if you're a rookie, you might have to sing, and that there's comedians that take over on a bus trip, which I think is cool. And that humanizes the guys. And if you have a player asking that to another player, you'll usually potentially get the rated R version of the story, which I think is more interesting. So, I think some of the things that the teams do together, or the shit talking that guys do. I mean, we had Rowdy Tellez, who's an absolute gem, back on yesterday. And actually, I think his comments might have gotten a little bit misconstrued, but he didn't even care. He's just like, whatever. He's such a chill dude, and he wants people to realize how the sport operates, with guys just going at each other in the locker room in a fun way. So Donaldson joins the Brewers, right, a couple weeks ago. And one of our guys was like, oh, you scared to talk to him? And Rowdy's like, no. He's like, I went up to him, said some choice words, like playfully, and said, introduce yourself to everyone. And then he's like, everyone knows who I am. Shit like that you just love to be a fly on the wall for. So I think we're getting a lot more of that out there nowadays, where I hadn't heard a lot of the back and forth in the past. I'm talking about the good back and forth, not the, I met so-and-so and he helped me move my pinky finger on my swing. We get a lot of that. Let's get something else.
You know what I really appreciate about your guys' show is also just the attire that you guys wear. Like, you guys are laid back. Like, a lot of you guys either wear t-shirts or sweatshirts, or just things that I think genuinely engage people more, because I think your look can say a lot. And I think the fact you guys keep it casual is very inviting to a lot of fans who say, okay, like, they're not taking themselves too seriously. And I think that resonates with people.
We were all big on that, because I think there's way too much suit wearing in sports. It is so try hard. Who goes to a game wearing a suit? Baseball game. How many people do you see at a baseball game wearing a suit that doesn't work for the team? 0? Maybe 2 as a joke. Maybe Halloween. I don't know. I don't get it. It's sports. It's not a wedding. It's not, I don't know, funeral. Like, everyone else is wearing chill clothing, and I don't think anybody's looking at a show, especially a show, right? Like, you're watching a show. I mean, it's the same thing with television for me nowadays. I still think it's like just aggressive. I did that. I wore a suit most days for most of my life just now as an adult at MLB, and I felt silly most of the time. Like, people are watching me talk about such a fun topic in life, and I look like my life is on the line. You know, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I'm with you. I'm such a t-shirt, jeans, shorts, whatever kind of person. And so is basically everyone else in our sport. So that's the best way for people to feel comfortable. Also, if we had to dress up in suits every day, I wouldn't do it. I would quit.
Are you guys going to do it as a joke one Friday, formal Friday?
No, because it would break the rules.
Yeah.
Wear whatever you want. That's the rules. Wear whatever you want. So maybe on Halloween, or I don't know. I can't see a scenario where we'd actually wear a full on suit. We've had some meetings for the show and for the company. And even still, I mean, some of those meetings, I think I've been like one step up. So it wasn't t-shirt and shorts, but it wasn't too much of a step up. It might have been like short sleeve button down and jeans, which is probably the furthest that will go. I hope so. If we're in suits a few years from now, unless somebody dumped so much cash on us for like a suit deal that we couldn't say no, then I'm good.
I mean, you host with two catchers, and you know the catchers have so much personality. They have to lead the infield and such, and it sometimes, as the case with AJ and Eric, it takes them post career as well with your show that you guys do. Did that convince you that they had the biggest personalities on the field? Did you know that catchers already had the biggest personality before and it just worked out? Or did all your interviews during this run of Foul Territory convince you that another position actually has the biggest personalities?
Catchers are the quarterbacks. Anyone that says otherwise is wrong. I learned that in college. I worked for the Somerset Patriots in high school, so I started to see that. College solidified it for me. I covered the University of Miami because I went there and I called games there. But also, this was the sweet spot for learning a lot about what I know about the game now. Is I would spend summers in the Cape Cod Baseball League calling games up there for the Chatham A's, and it was early days of doing broadcasting up there. Now they've got a full-fledged operation for every team. And it had only been in the works for maybe 3-4 years back then, started by some people that I know. They're kind of legends out there now for starting the whole process. But when I was there, the best interviews and the most reliable guys were like the three catchers on the team. There were other great ones too, but I learned from people around me. They would go, oh, just go to the catcher. Like, he knows everything going on with the team. It's usually got to be a good communicator, great speaker, all of that. So I feel like that's the case. Plus, they can break down offense and pitching better than most other position players. I think there's some position players that are like, I don't know. I don't pitch. I don't care. So they have to know. I think that's such a money position in the sport. And still, on a casual fan basis, I think it's underappreciated how good catchers can be as analysts in the sport. I think we happen to pick two of the best baseball personalities out there, but this is the platform for them. AJ obviously does his games. That's different. But for AJ and Kratz, they want to talk like this, not in the cookie cutter 20 seconds to make your point, but be very calculated with it type of format. I actually auditioned Eric Kratz when he came to MLB, and I was like, he's too raw. he's got to do digital social pod.
Which is really cool, and it embodies everything you guys do. And it's funny now, going back to the whole attire thing, going back to, again, how you approach your whole show. Like, we do a little bit of stuff like that. Like, so we get out to some of the Mariners games and we do some mini mic things with players where we just ask them a bunch of fun questions. And it's the same idea. We said, look, if we showed up the way that a lot of the media shows up, like some of the on-camera TV hosts out there for some of the news networks, if we're in a suit and tie, we'd look ridiculous asking these questions. We've got to be more laid back. We've got to show that we don't take ourselves too seriously. And that's how you get the best answers out of guys. So it's cool to see a lot of baseball starting to shift that way, in the sense of baseball can be fun. People can be laid back. And this is what I feel like the game itself has been going for such a long time. And I feel like over the last couple of years, we're starting to really have some movement toward that.
It's existed. It just hasn't been fully executed. It hasn't been brought out enough. It exists and it's been brought out, but not enough. So I think that our sport is super interesting, and it also has the volume that most other sports don't have, where something will pop up almost every day from a game or from news or from both, and it lasts for a long time. We don't have a ton of downtime in the sport if you're counting spring training and then the action that goes on in the off season, baseball does a really good job as an industry of stretching out the news. One thing that I've heard in the past about other sports is, oh, well, you guys should have that total frenzy where for 24, 48 hours, everyone signs in the NBA. And baseball's answer is, yeah, we don't want it to drag too long. So I think there's that balance, because like when Bryce Harper and Machado and some of those guys signed way late, I thought that was bad, because then it's spilling into spring training and taking away from that and starts to die down. It's almost like too much hype for too long. But at the same time, if everyone just signed on like November 10th, no one would give a crap until February, whatever. So I do like how all of the news kind of spreads out for a while. And you're right on being yourself when you're at games and you're talking to guys. I think that, and also, I mean, at least for us, allowing the guys to curse. Like, it always happens where they're like, oh, I listen to the show, and they're like, I think I can, right? They're like, can I say I don't give a shit? I'm like, yeah, go ahead. They're like, okay, and you feel like you can open up a little bit differently. So, and it's, yes, there's a component of it where you don't want it to just like a video conference call. So we definitely have dressed it up a little bit, so it feels big for the guys that are coming on. And now it's gotten pretty big, so they're cool with it. Plus, we have a streaming deal with a service that puts it not only through their streaming platform in Stadium, but also on TV, although it doesn't run live on the TV version because of the cursing, but then they dub it and they rerun it.
Last question for me, Scott. Was there an adjustment period for you? Did someone have to tell you to loosen up when you were doing it the first couple of times? And they're like, hey, like, actually, like, remember, this isn't TV. You could do whatever you want.
The opposite. So there were producers that I worked with that reached out either to me or to some others that I was working with that are my producers now. And they said, Scott putting on a front, is he trying too hard? Is he doing too much? And the answers from those that know me best were, no, that's how he always is. And I talked like that all the time behind the scenes. And I would try to bring out my personality, but you know what? When I look back, I couldn't do it the way I wanted to. I don't have regrets about anything, but I couldn't bring it out the way that I actually talk with everyone. And when I get going, which I'm not the top ranter on the show because I want it to be focused around players, but sometimes I do have to just get after it when someone says something really dumb in my mind, or kind of defend the media portion of the show, because I'm the one on that side. I'll just give you one quick example. Josh Hader spoke to the media after the 2-1 loss for the Padres against the Giants. And really, a game didn't mean anything technically. And that was kind of the point of the argument, was he was getting questions from reporters about like the whole not going more than 3 outs thing, which goes back to him having kind of beef. I mean, I could say with the Brewers. I don't know the whole story, so I don't want to like act like, oh, Josh is my best friend and he told me everything. But there was definitely beef about salary arbitration and how it's like, well, if you don't care about me and you're actually going to ding me for being used for multiple innings, then I want to be a 3-out guy and rack up saves and know my role and do my thing, because I'm one of the best relief arms in the sport. So anyway, the reporters were asking about how he could have come in to a moment where it was a lefty-lefty situation in the 8th inning and then picked up 3 more outs in the 9th. And I think some of the players that I was just on with, like AJ and Kratz, obviously primarily, thought, maybe poking the bear, or it's a bad question. I was like, no, it's not a bad question. I said, actually, the way it played out was perfect. That question could be asked, because they were like, they should ask it earlier in the season when the games mattered. But Hader's response was like something along the lines of, are we playing for the playoffs right now? Because I think mathematically they still had maybe a day or 2 left to be eliminated, but it's over. So I thought the answer was fine. I thought the whole way it played out was fine. So I just wanted to present the other side and say, hey, no, you want the media to ask that, and I want the real answer back from Josh being like, essentially, season's over. Now you're asking me about 4 outs? We're good. It's not the time. So just a little kind of inside piece of what goes on a daily basis, when I will kind of raise my voice and say, oh, hold up a second. Let me present to you what some others are seeing on this topic.
And the last one I've got, Scott, is favorite player you've had on the show so far is who? And who gives you the best answers?
Ooh. There's like different versions of best answers. So I'll go back to Ratty just because, I mean, he had injuries and more of an up and down this year, and he'll be the first to tell you that. Last year, he was a 30-100 guy playing for the Milwaukee Brewers. So perennial playoff team contender. And I felt like nobody knew him. And he's not on social media, but still, he curses. He's one of the top trash talkers in the sport. He gives you real answers, almost so much so that like he likes to kind of joke around a lot and be sarcastic, kind of tell like designed lies just to get a rise out of people. So I would say he is up there, and that's also fresh off my mind. But then there's some of the superstars too, which I think is important. When we interview a superstar like a Mookie Betts or a Mike Trout, what makes me smile is that we'll look at each other afterward and be like, I haven't been able to interview him like that before. I haven't heard him talk like that, right? Something along those lines. So I felt that with Trout when we were talking to him about Ohtani. I felt that with Mookie Betts when we were talking to him about leaving Boston, how he didn't want to go and he wasn't really feeling LA. Like all of those types of conversations with the big boys stand out too. And then you got the sneaky guys. So obviously I'm being super political, not giving you one answer. I'll give you Rowdy. Just I'd like to obviously try to cap myself from talking, but I can't sometimes. But Zach Gallen stood out too, because I like when guys will just say, hey, the Cardinals traded me, and I was kind of, I'm paraphrasing again, pissed about it and felt like because I didn't go to some random mini camp for a few days and it wasn't exactly the Cardinal way, they might have just made me more available for trade. And I'm going to use that as a chip on my shoulder. That's a great narrative. I'm all about that. And I love that stuff. So those are a few that said.
Well, I would bet the Arizona Diamondbacks are sitting there saying, I am glad Zach Gallen did not go to that mini camp. I'll say that much. So
hell yes.
Scott, this has been so awesome. We've really enjoyed getting to talk with you, getting to learn a little bit more about Foul Territory, and we certainly don't want you to miss your flight, so we'll let you get to that, but we hope we can do this again sometime soon because this has been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Lyle and TJ, I appreciate all the questions about FT. It's obviously something I left my previous job to do this, believe in this. I've had a great time connecting with fans. You guys do a great job, and we can definitely kick it in the off season with some Mariners talk too when I'm not at an airport being disrupted by the beautiful PA system. But I will say good luck to the boys. It was a team that I thought would go very far and still has a chance to do so, even though the young pitching is making me a little nervous down the stretch. But we can certainly kick it on some M's because the guys on my show were giving me crap for a good chunk of the year. And then I got to kind of fight back at them the last several weeks. So finish strong, get in the playoffs, and then we can talk about it in November.
That sounds great. And there's a teaser for all the listeners. We'll circle back to this in a few months down the road and talk some Mariners with Scott. Thanks again.
Cheers, guys. See ya.